Based on this story, we will learn about the narcissistic double bind. This is a manipulation tactic where a toxic partner sets up a scenario where you lose, no matter what you do. If you speak up, you are crazy. If you stay silent, you are complicit. Tonight, we watch a woman refuse to play the game. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The air in the Napa Valley Reserve Room smelled of old oak, beeswax, and the kind of aggressive perfume that costs more than my first car. I swirled the lukewarm water in my glass, watching Arthur hold court near the fireplace. He looked perfect, tuxedo sharp, hair swept back, that practiced, charming grin plastered on his face. "Veronica, darling," Susan's voice sliced through the ambient jazz. My mother-in-law didn't walk. She glided, like a shark in silk. She placed a hand on my shoulder, heavy and proprietary. She was speaking to the Davises, two of our biggest investors. You simply must forgive her silence. Arthur is the genius, of course. Veronica handles the dusting. She's essentially a glorified secretary with a ring, aren't you, dear? The group chuckled. It wasn't a warm sound. It was the dry, brittle sound of people who owned things. I looked at Arthur. He heard it. He had to have heard it. He took a sip of his Cabernet, caught my eye, and gave me a small, dismissive wink. "Don't make a scene," the wink said. "Laugh." I smiled, feeling the muscles in my cheeks tremble with the effort. "Someone has to keep the inventory straight, Susan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly," Arthur boomed, stepping in, wrapping an arm around my waist that felt more like a clamp. "She's the best little helper a man could ask for." I looked down at the polished floorboards. He wasn't defending me. He was agreeing with her. Why did the term helper feel more degrading than servant? Shat meta. Sex, 1.5. The leather seats of the Mercedes were cold, and I feel like back. The silence in the car was thick, suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic thump, thump of the tires on the highway. Arthur was humming. He was actually humming. "Great night," he said, tapping the steering wheel. "The Davises are in for another $2 million. I can feel it." "She called me a secretary, Arthur." He didn't look at me. He checked his side mirror, his profile illuminated by the passing streetlights. "Oh, Ronnie, don't start. She was joking. You have no sense of humor when you're tired." It wasn't a joke. She was diminishing my role in the company. I manage the provenance records. I authenticate the vintages. I'm not a secretary. "You're being sensitive," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming that smooth, reasonable tone he used on difficult clients. "It's unattractive, honestly. Just let it go." I turned to the window, watching the vineyards blur into black shapes. He wasn't just dismissing my feelings. He was rewriting reality. In his version of tonight, I was the problem. I was the buzzkill. If I'm so essential to the business, why does he need me to be small in public? I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, settle your bones quiet. I sat in the home office, the blue light of the monitor stinging my eyes. I needed to focus on something tangible. Numbers, data, things that didn't lie. I pulled up the master inventory for the Vault Fund. I was cross-referencing the insurance manifests. Item, Romane Conti, 1945. Serial ending in 442. I scrolled down. Client portfolio, Davis Trust. Allocation, 100% ownership. Standard. I took a sip of water. My finger hovered over the scroll wheel, moving down to the pending acquisitions list for a new client in Hong Kong. Item, Romane Conti, 1945. Serial ending in 442. I blinked. I wiped my screen with my sleeve. I typed the serial number into the search bar. 2 results. 2 different owners. 1 bottle. My heart did a strange flutter, like a bird trapped in a ribcage. It had to be a data entry error, a typo. Arthur was sloppy with the admin sometimes. That's why he needed me. But as I stared at the screen, a cold prickle of sweat broke out on my neck. How do you sell the same $1 million bottle twice without noticing? Arthur? He was in the kitchen making an espresso. The machine hissed violently, drowning out my voice for a second. He turned, holding the tiny cup, looking annoyed that I was awake. "It's 3 a.m, Ronnie. What?" "I found a duplicate entry in the ledger. The 1945 Conti. It's listed for Davis and the Chen account." He didn't flinch. He didn't drop the cup. He didn't even blink. He just took a sip, grimaced at the heat, and set it down. "So fix it," he said. "It's not just a list, Arthur. The contracts were sent. Both clients think they own it." He laughed, a short, sharp bark. "You're obsessing. You're still mad about Mom, so you're looking for things to nitpick to punish me. It's transparent, babe. This isn't about your mother. This is fraud if—" "Stop," he snapped. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of toothpaste and stale wine. "You're hysterical. It's a glitch in the software. I told the IT guys to patch it last week. God, can you stop trying to catch me out for 5 seconds and just be a supportive wife?" He walked out, leaving me standing in the kitchen. I felt unsteady. Was I projecting? Was I looking for a fight? But if it was a glitch, why didn't he ask to see the screen? The climate control hummed in the basement cellar. It was always 55 degrees down here. Perfect for wine, freezing for humans. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself. I needed to see the bottle, physical reality. That was the only cure for the gaslighting. I walked down the rows of floor-to-ceiling racks. The vault section was behind a biometric glass door. I pressed my thumb to the scanner. Green light. I found the slot. Row A, bin 4. The bottle was there. Dark glass, dust-caked label, the famous wax seal. It looked ancient. It looked holy. I pulled it out carefully, cradling it like a bomb. I tilted it under the inspection light. The fill level was high, maybe too high for a bottle that was 80 years old. I ran my thumb over the wax. It felt tacky, just slightly. Old wax should be brittle. It should chip. I looked at the label again. The paper was yellowed, stained, but the ink? Why does the ink look so sharp? I ran back upstairs to the office, the bottle clutched to my chest. I locked the door. I pulled out the archival binder, the physical photos we took when we bought the bottle at auction 3 years ago. I found the high-resolution macro shot of the cork seal. I held the bottle up to the screen. On the screen, the wax had a tiny imperfection, a microscopic bubble on the left side of the stamp. I looked at the bottle in my hand. The wax was smooth. Perfect. I grabbed a magnifying glass. I looked at the label. In the photo, the R in Roman A had a faint scratch through the bottom leg. On the bottle in my hand, the R was flawless. I set the bottle down on the desk, my hands shaking so hard I almost knocked over my lamp. This wasn't the bottle we bought. This was a replica. A very, very expensive, high-quality replica. Where is the real one? Or was there ever a real one? I couldn't stay in the office. I felt like the walls were closing in. I went back down to the cellar. Arthur had a private reserve in the back, a small cage where he kept wines for his personal consumption. He usually kept it locked with a physical key, but I saw the glint of metal on the tasting table nearby. He'd left his keys. Arrogance. He was so sure I was just a secretary who wouldn't dare snoop. I unlocked the cage. It was messy. Crates of everyday Bordeaux. But in the corner, under a tarp, was a heavy workbench. I pulled the tarp back. It wasn't wine. It was a chemistry set. Funnels, a label printer, a Coravan device, the kind with the needle that sucks wine out through the cork without opening the bottle. And next to it, a crate of empty bottles, generic, old bottles, and a bucket of red liquid that smelled like vinegar and cheap port. He wasn't just selling the same bottle twice. He was manufacturing them. He was refilling empty shells with swill and selling them as liquid gold. My stomach turned. I put a hand over my mouth to stop myself from retching. This wasn't just white-collar crime. This was an art form of betrayal. Who else knows? Meta. Pause. Sex. 1.5. The next a sickening contrast to the dark secrets in the basement. I was drinking black coffee, trying to stop my hands from trembling. Arthur walked in, looking fresh, wearing his tennis whites. "Morning, gloom cloud," he said, grabbing a banana. "Hey, I need you to sign something." He slid a document across the granite island. "What is it?" My voice sounded hollow. "Just standard liability stuff. The lawyers want to update the corporate structure. Since you're technically the inventory manager, they need you to sign off on the physical stock audits for the last quarter." I looked at the paper. "I, Veronica Miller, hereby attest to the authenticity and physical presence of all assets listed in Schedule A. If I signed this and the fraud was discovered, I would be the one liable. He could claim he was just the salesman, that he relied on my audits. I haven't finished the audit yet," I stammered. "Jesus, Veronica, just sign it. It's a formality. Do you want the business to get sued because of a paperwork error?" He leaned in, his eyes hard. "Trust me." I picked up the pen. I hovered it over the paper. "I'll sign it later," I said, putting the pen down. "I need to double-check the serials." His jaw tightened. "Fine, but have it on my desk by noon." He's setting me up. He's building my coffin. Susan came over at 11, just what I needed. We sat on the patio. She ordered tea. I poured myself a glass of water because I felt like I was going to pass out. "Arthur tells me you're being difficult," she said, blowing on her Earl Grey. "I'm being thorough, Susan." She sighed, a long, dramatic exhale. "You know, dear, when Arthur married you, I was worried. You were so plain, so middle class. But I thought, at least she'll be grateful. At least she'll understand that men like Arthur need support, not questions." She set the cup down. "He saved you from a life of mediocrity, Veronica. Don't bite the hand that feeds you just because you're feeling insecure about your little job." She looked at me with eyes that were cold and sharp as flint. "The inventory is fine," she said, her voice dropping. "It's always been fine. Don't go looking for rot where there is none." She knows. The realization hit me like a slap. She's not just his mother. She's his partner. I waited until Susan left and Arthur went to the club. I had maybe 2 hours. I went to the main server room in the basement, a closet off the wine cellar. I plugged in my external hard drive. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I needed the raw logs. Not the official interface Arthur showed the clients, but the back-end database changes. Copying, 15%. I heard the front door open upstairs. Panic, cold and sharp. He wasn't supposed to be back for hours. Copying, 45%. "Ronnie?" Arthur's voice echoed from the hallway. "I forgot my racket." I froze. If he came down here, if he saw the drive... Copying, 78%. Footsteps, heavy, coming toward the cellar stairs. "Ronnie, you down there?" 99%. Complete. I yanked the drive out, shoved it into my bra, and kicked the server closet door shut, just as Arthur's shadow fell across the cellar floor. I grabbed a bottle of Pinot from the nearest rack and turned around, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Just getting something for dinner," I said, holding up the bottle. He stopped on the stairs, squinting at me. "Bit early for drinking, isn't it?" "I'm cooking with it," I lied. He stared at me for a beat too long. Then he shrugged. "Right. See you later." He turned and left. I slumped against the cold rack, the hard drive pressing against my skin. I had the gun. Now I just had to pull the trigger. Arthur came home buzzing. He had that a massive sale. He threw his keys on the counter, startling me as I chopped vegetables. "Cancel your plans for Friday," he announced, loosening his tie. "We're hosting. The Davises, the Chen family, and the new perspective from Frantic, Markham." "Here?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the knife. "I thought you preferred the club." "The club is too public. This needs to be intimate, the family touch." He walked over, picking up a slice of raw pepper and popping it into his mouth. We need to close the vault fund expansion. 5 million minimum buy-in. I need you to curate the flight. Something that screams exclusive. Pull the 45s. My hand stilled. The 1945s, the ones he had sold twice. All of them? I asked. Yes, all of them. Show them what they're buying into. The history, the prestige. He grinned, but his eyes were dead. Don't mess this up, Ronnie. We need this capital. The market is volatile right now. He wasn't asking. He was commanding. He was so confident in his shell game that he was inviting the victims to the same table. Does he think he's invincible, or is he just that desperate? Sex 1.5. I met Jessica at a roadside diner 3 towns and over. She was an old college roommate, now a forensic accountant for the state. She looked at the hard drive I slid across the table like it was a loaded gun. You look tired, V, she said, plugging it into her ruggedized laptop. Just tell me I'm crazy, Jess, please. She clicked for 10 minutes in silence. Her expression shifted from professional curiosity to horror. She tapped the screen. You're not crazy. You're married to a Ponzi scheme. She turned the screen to me. See this? Asset overlap. He's collateralizing the same inventory for 3 different loans and selling the physical assets to private collectors. If anyone asks for their bottle, he has to buy one on the secondary market at a loss to fulfill the order. He's robbing Peter to pay Paul, but Paul is a Hong Kong billionaire who will break his legs. How long does he have? Weeks, she said. Maybe days. This dinner he's planning, it's a liquidity event. He needs the cash to cover the loans coming due on the 1st of the month. She handed the drive back. If you sign anything, you go to jail too. You know that, right? I gripped the drive. I know. I have the numbers. Now I need the theater. Friday arrived with a suffocating heat. The house was a flurry of caterers and florists, all directed by Arthur, who was barking orders into his headset. He cornered me in the pantry as I was checking the stemware. Listen, he said, fixing my collar, his touch rough. Tonight is strictly business. I don't want you boring them with provenance details or acid profiles. Just pour the wine, smile, and then fade away. Maybe help the caterers in the kitchen. You want me to serve and then hide? I want you to be a gracious hostess who knows when the men need to talk business, he corrected, his voice dripping with that patronizing sweetness. Susan is going to handle the social heavy lifting. She knows how to charm these types. Of course, I said, smoothing my skirt. I wouldn't want to get in the way of your genius. He didn't hear the sarcasm. He never did anymore. He just kissed my forehead, a dry peck. Good girl. Wear the black dress, the modest one. He wants a servant? Fine. I'll serve him exactly what he deserves. I went down to the cellar alone. The air was cool, a sanctuary from the madness upstairs. I walked to the vault. I bypassed the real bottles, what few remained. I went straight to the section Arthur had reorganized last week. I pulled 3 bottles of 1945 Romanée Conti, one for Mr. Davis, one for Mr. Chen, one for Mr. Markham. They looked identical. They were masterpieces of forgery. The labels were distressed perfectly. The wax was the right shade of crimson. But I knew. I knew the ink was too fresh. I knew the glass was a millimeter too thick. I placed them in the decanting basket. I didn't open them yet. That had to happen at the table. The theater required a live performance. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the cellar door. The woman staring back wasn't the inventory manager. She wasn't the secretary. She was the executioner. Is it betrayal if you're stopping a crime, or is it just justice? Cars rolled up the gravel driveway like hearses, black, sleek, silent. The Davises were first, dripping in diamonds. Then the Chens, quiet and observant. Finally, Markham, the new Mark, loud and smelling of expensive tobacco. Arthur was in his element. He greeted them with open arms, guiding them into the foyer, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Susan was already there, holding court with a champagne flute, wearing a gown that cost more than my college tuition. I stood by the kitchen door, invisible in my black dress. "And where is your lovely wife?" Mr. Chen asked politely. "Oh, she's fussing over the food," Arthur said, waving a hand. "You know how she is, a perfectionist in the kitchen." He didn't even look for me. He erased me from the room with a sentence. I stepped back into the shadows. Let him have his moment. It's the last one he'll ever get. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with crystal and silver. The mood was jovial, fueled by the appetizers and the promise of immense profit. I stood by the sideboard, ready to decant the red. Susan tapped her glass with a spoon. The room quieted. "I just want to propose a toast," she said, beaming at Arthur. "To my son, a visionary. In a world of safe bets, he dares to find the treasure. And to the partners who trust him." She paused, her eyes flickering to me in the corner. "And of course, to Veronica. It takes a special kind of patience to stand behind a great man and ensure his domestic life is as seamless as his business." "Hear, hear," the men murmured. Arthur raised his glass to her. "To family." I felt the anger rise, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I converted it into cold precision. Domestic life. Seamless. I picked up the corkscrew. The main course was served, venison with a berry reduction. Heavy, rich. It needed a wine with backbone. "Gentlemen," Arthur announced, standing up, "tonight I have something special. The crown jewel of the Vault Fund, the 1945. As you know, there were only 600 bottles produced. We are lucky enough to have secured allocation." I stepped forward with the basket. The room went silent. This was the holy grail of wine. I moved to Mr. Davis first. I presented the bottle. He nodded solemnly. I cut the foil. I drove the worm into the cork. I pulled, pop. I poured a splash. He swirled, sniffed, tasted. "Exquisite," he whispered. "The earthiness. You can taste the history." I moved to Mr. Chen. I pulled a second bottle from the sideboard. Arthur frowned slightly. He hadn't expected me to open two, but he couldn't stop me. I poured for Mr. Chen. He tasted incredible. The structure is perfect. I moved to Mr. Markham. I opened the third bottle. Arthur was staring at me now, his eyes wide, a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He knew. He knew there shouldn't be three. Not here, not now. "Why are you sweating, Arthur? Are you worried the wine won't breathe?" One. I finished pouring. I set the 3-bottle from the wines to be blue. He still danced, and him right to me. I labels facing out. 3 identical icons of wealth. "It really is a miracle," I said, my voice clear and steady in the hush of the room. Arthur stood up halfway. "Ronnie, maybe we should let the gentleman enjoy." "A miracle," I continued, ignoring him, "that we managed to secure 3 bottles of a vintage where only a handful exist in the world. And even more miraculous," I reached into my pocket and pulled out 3 folded pieces of heavy cardstock. I placed one in front of each man, "is that you all hold the certificate of ownership for the same serial number." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Mr. Davis picked up his paper. Mr. Chen picked up his. They looked at the papers. They looked at the bottles. They looked at each other. "Arthur," Mr. Davis said. His voice wasn't warm anymore. "Why does my certificate match Chen's?" Arthur's face went gray. There must be a clerical error. Veronica handles the paperwork. She must have printed the wrong—" "I didn't print these, Arthur," I said softly. "You did. When you sold the bottle to Mr. Davis in February, and to Mr. Chen in May, and to Mr. Markham last week." I looked at the investors. "And if you check the corks, you'll find they're synthetic composites, the kind you buy at a hobby shop." The trap snapped shut. Sex 1.5. "Sequences, was this a joke?" Markham roared, his face turning purple. No, please, gentlemen," Arthur stammered, holding his hands up, retreating toward the fireplace. "It's a misunderstanding. My wife, she's not well. She's been under a lot of stress." "Don't you dare," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The server logs are already with the SEC, Arthur, and the police. And I sent a copy to your mother's email, just so she knows exactly what her visionary son has been doing. I looked at Susan. She was frozen, her champagne glass halfway to her mouth, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. Arthur turned on me, his eyes wild, venomous. You bitch. You ungrateful, useless bitch. I made you. I gave you everything. You gave me a job, I said, and I did it. I audited the inventory. I took off my ring. It clattered loudly on the mahogany table. Consider this my resignation. He lunged for me, but Mr. Markham, a man twice his size, grabbed him by the lapels and shoved him back into his chair. I didn't stay to watch the police arrive. I didn't need to see him in handcuffs. I knew what that looked like. I wanted to remember him like this, small, cornered, and terrified. I walked out the front door, past the caterers who were huddled in the hallway, whispering. The night air was cool and smelled of jasmine and damp earth. I walked to my car, the reliable sedan I bought with my own money before I met him. I threw my bag in the passenger seat. I looked back at the house one last time. The windows were glowing with warm, golden light. It looked beautiful. It looked perfect. It was a lie. I started the engine. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel happy exactly. I felt lighter, like I had finally put down a heavy weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving the vault behind me. Where do I go now? Anywhere I want. Lesson learned. The narcissistic double bind relies on your participation. It works only as long as you are willing to choose between two losing options, silence or insanity. But there is always a third option, the truth. When you introduce undeniable facts into a gaslighter's reality, the structure collapses. Arthur relied on Veronica's desire to be a good wife to keep his crimes hidden. He assumed she would value his reputation over her own reality. By rejecting the role of the confused wife and embracing the role of the witness, Veronica didn't just win the argument, she dismantled the game entirely. The lesson? When someone tells you you're crazy for noticing the cracks, hand them a sledgehammer. Sex. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.